Hi, I'm Barbara Lucas, and welcome to the Green Room, where we explore the environmental topics that green up our world. Beekeepers in the U.S. lost 44% of their hives last year, and this is the 10th year in a row that losses have been unsustainable. Our food supply is dependent on pollination by bees. What can we do about this very real threat? Today's guests are Eileen Dickinson and Rita Mitchell, volunteers with the Bee Safe Neighborhood campaign. Rita and Eileen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So tell us, let's get started. What is the Bee Safe Neighborhood campaign?
Well, it's a concept of having havens of yards within the cities that do not use pesticides, that are free of neonicotinoids and other pesticides that harm bees and other pollinators. And our goal, as in our little project, is to have 75 contiguous yards in various parts of Ann Arbor that are free of chemicals, but that also provide food through flowers that those pollinators use throughout a season for their food and for their habitat.
Ypsilanti already has something like this
They do, and we took that concept and applied it here. We were really fortunate to have a model, I think, and they've been successful, and we think that we can do the same and have two cities nearby each other that have this kind of safe place for pollinators. In addition to having the safety for the pollinators, it's good for pets and kids and
good
people.
Point. Mm-hmm. Good point. And then there's something, Bee City USA. What's that?
Yeah, that's an organization out of, I think it's out of Asheville, North Carolina, and they certify cities as Bee Safe, and Ypsilanti was deemed a Bee City last year, and just this summer Ann Arbor has also been named a Bee City. So that
great.
formalizes, in a way, our effort, and we feel like we have the support of the city. So they have to document activities that are educational about pollinators and provide materials to people.
Great. What I love about this concept is it's kind of like reverse peer pressure. And usually when you talk about this kind of thing with people, they'll say, well, I really would like to have my yard have more natives and less lawn, but I'm worried about what my neighbors would think. I don't want to do it because of my neighbors. And this idea that 75 contiguous yards need to be chemical free in order to certify the neighborhood.
We've actually found that the response has been very favorable. We have 85 households that have joined us in this, which is really good in our small target neighborhood that we've started.
Great.
So the point is, we kind of want to create, I guess you could call it a field that would be helpful to these pollinators, and so it takes us a while to do that. That's our challenge, is filling in our gaps.
So when you say a field, like they need to be able to forage in a large area that's chemical free and has a lot of native plants. That
and we expect there to be variety, which also gives neighbors a chance to make some choices that they like.
So where can people go to get ideas for what kind of native plants they might be able to use for bees?
There are a lot of good resources at MSU. If you go to native plants, search native plants on the MSU site. There are also some local vendors. There's the Native Plant Nursery here in Ann Arbor. There's Wild Type Nursery in Mason, Michigan. There's also Wild Ones, the organization for native plants.
They have a local chapter.
They have a local chapter.
So you can go to wildones.org for the national and then click on chapters and find the Ann Arbor chapter. Yeah, they have a lot of members that love to teach and share their plants.
Yes, and they have good tours of gardens, native plant gardens in town.
And how can people find out more about growing things without pesticides?
Beyond Pesticides is a really good national organization. They also rank pesticides, which ones are least harmful to pollinators, and there are good resources there.
We do have an opportunity that lets people kind of get in a ground floor stage. We have levels of pledging, and so that really helps us in gaining our members in our little pollinator haven. And so a level 1 just means that someone has agreed to not use neonicotinoids, which are probably the best known and worst of the pesticides that affect bees and other native pollinators. And so if people will just not use that, they can continue to use other things, we would encourage them over time to drop that, and we're hoping that as we progress over time, that we'll have a lot of people see that it's not necessary to squirt something with a lot of Roundup, that actually pulling is just as effective for a lot of weeds.
Mm-hmm. Great. And one thing that I have found is that in my yard, if I just let, for instance in the backyard, if I just let there be a kind of a little mini hedgerow, an area where I'm not mowing and I'm letting things just grow up naturally, that some of those plants that grow up are what bees love best, such as the, you know, milkweeds and things, just grow up naturally.
Yeah, it's actually easier than spraying Roundup along the fence to keep the vegetation down.
And so what you get is the benefit of the flowers and the pollinators. It's a good combination.
One thing I've heard is that, again, people are worried about what their neighbors will think. And there's a professor here at the University of Michigan, Joan Nassauer, I believe, and she has a program that she's done a lot of research on called Cues of Care, where she has signage or some kind of fencing or something around the more natural area to let people know that it's there intentionally. And one thing I love is the sign, the Be Safe Neighborhood sign that you are letting people purchase for $10 or $15 or something, and they can put it in their yard and people will know that it's intentional.
There is good signage also with the Xerxes Society. They have a pollinator habitat sign.
Okay.
And
Xerxes.org?
Xerxes.org.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, so, and what about our attitudes towards insects? How does that impact all this?
Insects are so beneficial in so many ways. There are a lot of insects, particularly wasps, that are predatory on pests, on garden pests. So insects are beneficial in the garden, and so many people want to get rid of everything that they see that's an insect. They're also good for pollination. Some wasps, all the native bees.
And I think one of the things that I feel is, since I've gotten involved in this project, is I've always focused on the plants, and it's made me think more broadly that I really see this now as part of the web of life, literally, because the insects that come to these plants are actually food for a lot of birds that travel through our areas. And I read someplace, I think we even had it on our own Facebook page, that it takes something like 4,000 caterpillars to raise a family of chickadees. I mean, that is an immense amount of work for parent chickadees to do to raise their young. And it means that we really need a lot of insects if we want to have a native population of birds. And we're all worried about birds too. So it's so all connected that I think it makes it even more interesting to me to participate in this way.
Weren't you telling me how many native pollinators do we have in Michigan?
We have 400 species of native bees.
Wow, 400.
In Michigan, and probably 10 times that many in the U.S.
Wow. Yeah. And so this is something they can get on the MSU website, and it has all these different pollinators. Fascinating.
Yeah, and the plants that support them.
Great.
Yeah, and it's good for identifying things out in the yard.
Fun, too. So how about quickly, what kind of choices should we be making in the supermarket or the farmer's market in terms of foods that can help support the whole pollinator ecosystem?
I think that big agriculture is not a friendly practice to pollinators or insects in general. There's a lot of monoculture, there's planting right up to the road, right up to any kind of fence. There aren't any weeds left that are beneficial.
That's the Roundup Ready crops, I believe, right?
Roundup Ready crops, yes. Yeah. And a lot of the big ag practices are very harmful to honeybees as well. The dust that's on the seed coatings that are coated with neonicotinoids is damaging in the spring when they're planting. And then the spraying that happens from airplanes, and they also spray right before they harvest to dry things down to kill the plant a little bit more. So I like to support small local farmers who are organic practicing and or organic certified.
Great.
And I think in addition to what Eileen has said, the practices of large farming also harm the native bees just as much, perhaps more. We just don't see them in groupings the way we do around hives. But in my own observations, it just seems like I don't see as many bugs. You know, when a friend of mine was calling my attention this summer to the fact that when we were young, we would drive up north and the windshield of the car would be smashed with bees, bugs of all types. And I don't see it happening now. So there is a difference. And I think that that's part of what we're seeing is a result of use of lots of chemicals that harm.
Yeah, there's actually some research that's being done in the UK where they have sticky stuff they put on windshields or car bumpers or something to check and see how much insect life is caught on them, because it's true. People are saying it anecdotally that insects are just reducing in numbers greatly. Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything. Your Facebook page, how can people find that?
Be Safe Ann Arbor.
Okay, great. And I also want to tell the audience about a website called Bee Friendly Yard, which has a lot of the different shows we've done through the years on bees through this CTN Green Room. And one of the people that we've interviewed is Douglas Tallamy, who wrote this book that Rita brought to show, and it's wonderful, all about why native plants are important for insect life. Great. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It's been really interesting. For an online archive of today's show, go to ewashna.org/greenroom. Thanks for joining us here in the Green Room.